Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, pretty much everybody in America feels awful about what is happening right now to average Ukrainians. They didn't ask for this war, and they're really suffering. So your heart goes out. You feel compassion for tragedy, no matter where it is, whether it's a landslide in Sri Lanka or a war in Ukraine. So you feel compassionate. On the other hand, you may have at some point over the last month asked yourself, why is the invasion of a faraway Eastern European country suddenly the single biggest thing that ever happened in our country, in America? That's kind of strange, especially given everything we've got going on in the U.S. right now. And what is it with Biden's response to this war? That's weird, too. Biden keeps telling us these energy sanctions are going to crush Putin. But they haven't. That's clearly not true. Putin's fine. The ruble has almost completely recovered since the day Russia invaded. So much for destroying the Russian economy and getting the Russian military to withdraw from Ukraine. And yet, we in the U.S. are paying higher and higher gas prices thanks to these sanctions. So Biden is not hurting Vladimir Putin. Biden is hurting American citizens. Why? What exactly is this about? Well, the first thing you should know and never forget is that nothing changes a society faster than a war, even a war in another country. If you want to reorder a society, you're going to need a major crisis in order to do it. The democratic process is not going to work for you. The democratic process will never get you to total transformation because voters almost never want systemic change. They prefer incremental improvement, and that's why they tend to elect the very same people to office year after year. They do that because radicalism, big change, scares them. They are not looking, and they are never looking, for massive, abrupt changes to the way they live. So again, if you want a revolution, you're going to need some kind of emergency to justify it. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to change a country's 250-year-old system of voting in order to make that system much more vulnerable to mass election fraud, which you would commit. How would you go about doing something like that? You couldn't do it by referendum. No. You might need to declare a public health emergency and then institute vote by mail in the name of fighting a pandemic. You should try that because that might work. Or, for another example, how would you go about taking full control over an economy built on fossil fuels? Well, you'd first have to break the existing economy, because if you gave people a choice over how to power their vehicles, homes, and businesses, not many of them would choose windmills. No, they'd go with what they have, which is oil and gas. So you'd have to take that choice away from them. You couldn't let them choose. And you couldn't do this by democratic means because no legislature would ever vote for a change like that, because they know voters don't want it. So instead, you might use a war underway across the world to declare an energy shortage in your country and then make fossil fuels unaffordable for the average person. And that way, people would have no choice but to switch over to the new system, which, not incidentally, you and your friends and your donors would control. So that'd be one way, maybe the only way, to get a Green New Deal without having to get it through Congress, because it never would go through Congress. Do you think that's what's happening here? You'd hate to think so. You wouldn't want to think that your government would intentionally exacerbate the suffering of millions of Ukrainian civilians in order to take over America's energy grid. But that seems to be exactly what is happening right now, and we know this because the administration has essentially told us so. As of tonight, the vast majority of electricity that we use in this country for everything, about 80% of our electricity, comes from just three sources: natural gas, coal, and nuclear energy. The Biden administration has pledged to get rid of all three of these things. There will be no more coal plants, Joe Biden said during the campaign. John Kerry, our aging climate czar, agreed. No more coal plants operating in the United States by 2030, he said. No clue on how we're going to power the cities that are totally dependent on coal-fired electricity. But here's Joe Biden explaining that electricity for your home and your city, electric cars, all of it pretty darn soon is going to come from heat pumps and solar panels.
Under my plan, which is before the Congress now, we can take advantage of the next generation of electric vehicles that a typical driver will save about $80 a month from not having to pay gas at the pump. If your home is powered by safer, cheaper, cleaner electricity like solar or heat pumps, you can save about $500 a month on average.
Wow. So we just need to completely change the way that you power your home. We're going to get rid of coal, gas, and nuclear energy, and you can save, on average, some more, $500 a month. You just have to power your house with solar panels. It's simple. So where will these solar panels come from? Well, as it happens, they will come from China. We can be certain of that because the Chinese make more than 80% of all the world's solar panels, which is to say, all of them. So we're going to be even more reliant, far more reliant on Chinese manufacturing than we already are. Offend the Chinese and no more electricity. So that's a risk, considering they despise us. But it's going to be worth it, Joe Biden says. We're going to upend the entire U.S. economy and make ourselves completely dependent on a country that seeks to displace us. But you're going to save $500 a month on your energy bill. $500 a month, not a small thing. But it's not actually true. So shortly after Biden spoke, in a ritual we're becoming very used to, the White House issued a clarification. It turns out that Biden meant to say, and if he wasn't senile, would have said, that you're going to save $500 a year, so that's 1/12 of what he promised, if we turn over our electricity production to China. So $500 a year, not a month. So he was only off by about $5,500. On the other hand, $500 a year is still something. It's enough to fill your SUV maybe 3 times. Watch.
It cost tech entrepreneur Mo Hassan $140 every 2 days to fill up his 2021 Cadillac Escalade when he cruises the streets of Southern California. Prices vary depending on where you buy. At many stations, it's still way above $7 a gallon, still the highest in the country. Though we've had a dip of a few cents in recent days, hardly a game changer.
Oh, it's just $7.50 a gallon, not a big deal. It's always been this way. Oh, no, it hasn't. Pretty soon they'll tell you that, but we just want to say for the record that that's not true. In 2018, which is not ancient history, the average price of a gallon of gasoline in the state of California, most expensive in the country, was $3.60 per gallon. Now it's double that. How did that happen? Does it have anything to do with the current president's pledge to, quote, phase out fossil fuels forever? Gasoline is a fossil fuel. He wants to phase it out. Shouldn't surprise you that it's more expensive. Or could it be Vladimir Putin's fault? Did Putin do it? Here's what PragerU found out when they spoke to people who are actually buying gas. Watch.
Why do you think that the gas prices have gotten so high?
Well, I think it's to do with maybe all the sanctions on Russia, part of it.
The United States stopped importing Russian oil or something to that effect. I don't know if I have the details quite right, but that's what I think.
Part of that is definitely true. A lot of it is somewhat because America is an energy independent. We don't produce a lot of our own energy anymore. But Russian oil is only about 3% of the oil that America gets. The price of gas was going up before Russian oil. We had our own energy, our own oil production.
It would be a lot easier and a lot more sufficient, a lot more reliable too. Yeah, that's a very interesting thought. I have not thought about that before.
Interesting response. So people know it has something to do with Russia. They've been told it's all Putin's fault. They kind of know there's a connection between the sanctions against Russian energy and our own rising gas prices. What they don't understand is it's much deeper than that. They're blaming Russia. So there's a reason the people pushing this war love this war. It's an all-purpose excuse for the disasters they have made, the disasters that benefit them. But if you take a look at the numbers, you see there's a lot more going on here than just a war in Ukraine, no matter what they tell you. In February of 2021, a year after the corona pandemic began and a month after Donald Trump left office, the average price of gas in the United States was about $2.50. Since then, the price of gas has continued to rise. By last November, months before the Russian invasion, the per gallon average was $3.39. So no, the war in Ukraine did not do this. Putin did not do this. Putin didn't, by the way, sanction himself. Energy inflation is a direct and intended result of White House policies. The whole point of these policies is to make it impossible for you to use fossil fuels because you can't afford it, and then substitute those fossil fuels, which you could afford, with new green energy that you have no choice but to use. They're saying that essentially out loud. Here's the Speaker of the House, third line of the presidency, Nancy Pelosi. Watch her explain that even though we probably could fix this problem by producing more of our own energy in the United States, which we own, which is the root of our prosperity, we're not going to do that. Because cheap oil would devalue her family's investments in renewables. Sorry, we didn't mean to say that. We mean cheap oil would destroy the planet. Watch.
We cannot allow the fossil fuel industry to use this as an excuse to reverse everything we're doing to save the planet.
Do you hear that? Everything we're doing to save the planet. Now, these are the people who preside over the dirtiest state out of 50, California, who don't go outside except in their own walled gardens, who know nothing about the environment, who could care less about the environment, who are trashing the environment, and who are raising your gas prices in the name of the environment so their families grow rich. We can't stop what we're doing. She's just saying it right up there in English. We're doing this, which they are. So this is a lady with huge estates all over the country who brags that she's a $30,000 freezer, telling you you're just going to have to suck it up and be poor for the planet she doesn't care about at all. So who's benefiting from this? China's benefiting from it. We already told you that. That's obvious. But the Biden administration's donors are benefiting from it too. And one of them is now the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. Thanks to reporting from the Washington Free Beacon, which we are grateful for, we know that Jennifer Granholm held millions of dollars in stock in so-called green energy companies while she was serving as the Secretary of Energy. So you hold energy stocks while you're the Secretary of Energy. Where's the Justice Department? Jennifer Granholm did not sell these equities even after she took office. Is that a conflict of interest? Of course it is. It's criminal. But Jennifer Granholm didn't seem bothered. She knew she would never be charged with anything. The Biden administration isn't bothered either. This is the whole game. Make your donors rich by saving the planet. Jennifer Granholm is still running the Energy Department. Here she is explaining that her stock portfolio would really benefit if we, quote, decarbonized the fossil fuel industry. Watch.
We want to invest in renewables. We want to invest in the technologies that decarbonize the fossil fuel industry. To become energy independent with clean energy is the medium to long-term strategy.
So it does kind of answer one enduring mystery. Why would they put someone in as Secretary of Energy who knows nothing about energy, never been in the energy business, has no idea what the energy grid is, has no clue how your iPhone is charged overnight? None at all. And yet she's the Secretary of Energy? Oh, because it's an investment scam, and they're all in on it. Check investments right now in renewable energies since the man-made energy crisis that Joe Biden and his sanctions set off. And you'll see it's quite a robust market right now. Who's benefiting from that? Right? People like Jennifer Granholm. She wants to force you to subsidize her investments. That's the medium to long-term strategy. And no crisis in the last decade has given them better cover than the invasion of the client state of Ukraine that Jennifer Granholm can't even find on a map. There's a reason they're focused on Ukraine, and it's to give you the Green New Deal whether you want it or not. Mark Morano is the author of Green Fraud, Why the Green New Deal is Even Worse Than You Think. He joins us tonight. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. You've written and thought so much and reported so much about the Green New Deal. No chance Congress would ever pass anything like that because nobody wants it. But a war into which we are now being drawn because of their policies is a perfect cover for giving us the Green New Deal whether we want it or not.
Yes, it is. In fact, let's look at this here. They introduced the Green New Deal in Congress and then never scheduled hearings, a vote. There's no town halls. There's no constituent services. No one wanted it. They didn't want to vote. They didn't need a vote. Biden declared that every cabinet agency would be a climate agency. And one of the biggest things about our energy that a lot of people miss is the defunding of our energy through the banking system, through the SEC. They're now forcing climate disclosures on everyone. They are now have their claws, federal regulators, in every aspect pretty much of any business going forward if this keeps up, without a vote of Congress. That's what they're looking for. And they know the Green New Deal won't pass, so what they're going to do, the COVID lockdowns actually gave them many aspects of the Green New Deal with the immediate lockdown. But now, going forward, they're doubling down, using the Russian invasion. The solution to the Russian invasion is the solution to climate change. It happened to be the solution to COVID, which is more working from home, less driving, less freedom, higher energy costs, more restrictions on your liberty. Regardless of the crisis, it always empowers the administrative state, the bureaucrats, and those in power.
Well, maybe the point of the crisis is to do that. And look, this is not a civic show, but I hear the word democracy roll off the tongues of virtually every authoritarian in Washington. Is this how a democracy works? You use a diversion to get massive societal changes around the legislature and impose them by force? Is that what democracy is?
Well, no, what they've decided is they're going to rule by emergency declaration, by crisis management. This is how they want to do it. The COVID emergency declaration gave us every particularly blue state, some red state, every governor became a dictator virtually overnight as they imposed whatever mandate they felt like, whether it was masks, kids, vaccine passports, you name it, they could do it because they were empowered. You go back in history, the fall of the Roman Empire was due to the abuse of emergency power. The centralization of power, Middle Ages, the German Republic, 1933, 12-year declaration in Germany led to, of course, all the abuse in Germany. So this is how we got the Patriot Act, through this kind of crisis management. And now they're using, right after COVID crisis, they're going to pile on with this. And people would not volunteer to give up their cars, their SUVs. But now you have reports like International Energy Agency calling for stopping a car driving on Sunday, odd even license plates, lowering speed limits, SUV taxes, because we're in this energy crisis. They're achieving things they could never get through the election.
Yeah, people who tell you the oceans are going to rise are buying $30 million houses on the beach.
Well,
right. Yeah, I don't believe you anymore.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg.
Mark Randall, we're out of time. I appreciate your coming on this Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So Biden is continuing to expand the power of the federal government to spy on Americans. One member of Congress finally has a plan to stop illegal surveillance of American citizens in America by our intelligence. What's the point of American intel agencies? Couldn't be clearer in the law. The point of an American intel agency is to monitor what happens in other countries and then report back to the President of the United States so that he can make better decisions about U.S. foreign policy. Period. That's why we have the CIA. That's the only reason we do. These agencies are not allowed to spy on American citizens because that would invalidate democracy. But they're doing it on a huge scale. And they're doing it on direct orders from the Biden administration. Not a conspiracy theory. It's verified. It's true. Now, new legislation from Congress seeks to stop that. This legislation has been introduced by Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah. The congressman joins us now to explain. Congressman, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. This is illegal. Nobody seems to care. We should care. What would your legislation do?
Well, to emphasize what you've already said, Tucker, the whole purpose of the IC intelligence community, NSA, CIA, and others, is to concentrate on foreign threats, foreign terrorism, of foreign nation states, Russia, China, North Korea. It was never, ever intended that they would look at U.S. persons until this administration comes along and says, you know, those other threats are important, but the real threat we're worried about is domestic violent extremism, DVEs they call them, white supremacy. And because this white supremacy threat is so great, which by the way is nonsense, but by their thinking, because this is such a great threat, now we need to use the power, the awesome tools that we give the National Security Agency or the CIA or the DIA. We're compelled to use those upon U.S. persons, the administration says. And that's why you have a situation like about a year ago where the Office of Director of National Intelligence, not the FBI, not Homeland Security, the DNI, using the tools of the National Counterterrorism Center, provides a briefing to Congress on what? White supremacy. On domestic terrorism. It should enrage Americans that they would think that they would allow them to use this awesome power. Hey, if you think you want to build an American KGB, if you think that's a good idea, then keep going down this road. But if you think it's a horrible, fearsome idea, then please work with me. I'm talking now my members of Congress. Please work with me to try and stop it.
So they've spied on this show. They've admitted it. I've spoken directly to two sitting members of Congress whose job it is to oversee the intelligence agency who told me directly that they were being spied on by the intel agencies and they didn't do anything about it. I wonder how many members of Congress are too intimidated to push back the powers of these agencies.
Well, I guess we're going to find out. But, you know, and it's not just members of the press. I mean, we know that the CIA and Director Brennan lied about it when they were spying on members of the Senate. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Tucker, if the last 4 or 5 years have taught us anything, it has surely taught us that senior members of the FBI and Department of Justice clearly were deceptive to Congress, deceptive to the FISA courts, deceptive to the American people. And now, once again, they want to increase that ability, to enhance that ability by drawing in these other agencies. And once again, There's no reason for it. There's no need for it. By the way, there's enough terror threats and other threats for them to, it's not like they've got extra bandwidth, like they don't have anything to do. And very clearly, the Department of Justice and FBI, that's their responsibility, not the CIA, not the NSA.
Exactly. So nicely put. We are rooting for you, Congressman Chris Stewart. I hope you'll come back and let us know who didn't vote for this. That'll be interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So for the course of the pandemic, Tony Fauci has rejected science, the essential and very basic concept of natural immunity. But it turns out that years ago, on the addiction crisis in this country, and not just to drugs. I mean, of course, there's fentanyl, but there's also alcohol and wheat thins and all kinds of things people get addicted to. But maybe the most dangerous addiction of all, and you see it a lot in our business, is the addiction to publicity. And poor Tony Fauci just went right down the hole. He's a publicity wino. Since the COVID pandemic began, with a brief interruption due to the war in Ukraine, Fauci has constantly, virtually every hour, given interviews to media outlets which lionize him. The problem with this strategy is Fauci talks so much that every now and then he just kind of forgets where he is and says something true. That happened in late 2020 when he sat for an interview with the New York Times. Fauci was asked whether natural immunity might also be an effective defense against COVID. Fauci admitted to the Times that he, in fact, had been lying about natural immunity in order to convince Americans to take the vaccine. The Times reported that, quote, Fauci acknowledged he had slowly but deliberately been moving the goalposts on natural immunity, end quote, to sell Pfizer products. But back in 2004, when there weren't Pfizer vaccines to sell for COVID, Tony Fauci was completely honest about natural immunity because he wasn't being paid not to be. He said it is your best defense against another infectious virus, the flu. Watch this clip of Tony Fauci.
She's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so
she should not get it?
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
The most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself. Oh, that's probably not news to the millions of Americans who recovered from COVID and then were told they'd be fired unless they got their fourth booster. That was Tony Fauci before he decided to move the goalposts on behalf of Pfizer. So the Biden administration has informed us that yesterday was International Trans Day of Visibility. At the Daily Wire, Michael Knowles pointed out the whole concept of a Trans Day of Visibility is a little ironic. As he pointed out, quote, the entire premise of transgenderism is we must deny our visible bodies for our invisible gender identities. Well, that's pretty deep and true, but whatever. He was Joe Biden yesterday celebrating trans visibility.
To everyone celebrating Transgender Day of Visibility, I want you to know that your president sees you. Jill, Kamala, Doug, our entire administration sees you for who you are, made in the image of God. To parents of transgender children, affirming your child's identity is one of the most powerful things you can do to keep them safe and healthy.
No one's attacking transgender kids, young people. Most of them have been led to where they are by adult predators. Here's our newest four-star admiral speaking of. Watch.
Well, it is so wonderful that we have a President Biden, who supports us and advocates for us and who sees us.
Oh, come on. This is just, the level of self-parody becomes absolutely unbearable. But we still can ask the obvious question, which is, if sex distinctions are fake, do we still have women? Delano Squires is a contributor to Fearless with Jason Whitlock, and we're happy to have him rejoin us. Thanks for coming on. So what is this? I mean, you know, this has consequences. It's not simply about one group of people and their fight for recognition or equality or whatever the point is. We're redefining sex. So what does that mean for the civilization?
Tucker, that's a big deal for civilization. And I think in the video you played, when you hear the president use the term made in the image of God, right? He's in biblical language about the Imago Dei. But what he's doing is corrupting it, because God made male and female. And whether you believe in Genesis or genetics, that is what everyone has believed basically up until 7 years ago. The biggest problem with this, or one of the big problems with this, is that this entire movement has been aided and abetted I'd say primarily by two groups. One, some of the most powerful women in media, journalism, politics, business, whether they work at CNN or MSNBC or New York Times, who have spent an entire career talking about how hard it's been as a woman to achieve equality. And then they've allowed themselves to be cowed into silence by a small group of men who are experiencing serious mental health challenges, and a large group of craven activists. So for women like Joy Reid or Rachel Maddow or Jamel Hill, so again, whether they work at ESPN or MSNBC, they finally found a group of men that they're willing to submit to. Because when Rachel Levine speaks and when Leah Thomas speaks, these women feel that they have to be silent. So in effect, they are about to diversity, inclusion, and equity themselves right out of existence.
That is so deep and so true. I wonder, and so nicely put, thank you for that. Do you think they realize it?
I think they know it, because one of the things that you'll see, right, you may have, like Congressman Cori Bush talk about birthing persons, right?
Right.
But then we'll talk about abortion, they'll tell men to shut up because this is a woman's issue. So every once in a while, an issue will come up that'll knock them right back into reality. But really what they're doing, they're robbing young girls of opportunities in sports, in culture and politics, and they are completely undermining the message that they've been giving for the last 6 decades. They've been telling girls, speak up for yourself, don't be afraid, and in many respects, Tucker, they've gone from I am woman, hear me roar, to singing, this is a man's world.
It's almost like they don't really know what they want. Just throwing that out there. Mr. Squires, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, there was a show on TV called Lie to Me, and the premise was simple. People lie a lot, and when they do lie, they give off what are called technical show, but the premise is totally real. There are experts, mostly in law enforcement, who study deceptive behavior. Retired FBI agent Frank Reynolds is one of them, and we thought it'd be interesting to spend an hour with him on a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today to learn how to catch someone in the act of deception. Here's part of
detection, deception, I like to look at it as, I don't try to find where they're lying, because once you start listening to someone and say, oh, that's where they lied, you stop listening to everything else because you're looking for that lie, that aha moment. I like to listen just for deceptive language and different aspects of how people try to deceive.
Interesting. There's a little bit of overlap between what you're describing and what we do.
Oh, yeah.
Watching people with power explain why they're doing what they're doing, what they plan to do, and certain words are invariably a tell.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So describe some of the deceptive language that you notice when you're talking to criminal suspects.
Well, let's take it from, a bigger, the one over the world type of look. When you're looking for someone, if you're listening to someone and you're trying to determine if they're deceptive, the first thing I look at is the balance of what they're saying, the balance of the statements. Because a truthful statement, a statement that has veracity, majority of it should be about the topic at hand. Now, in the political world, you listen to any of these politicians talk, they do a lot of double talk.